Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Mesa Minute. Tonight we have two special guests from Timmy's Tortoise Rescue, Rehab, and Rehome. My first guest, Krystal Johnson, is the founder of the Tortoise Rescue and is speaking with us about the issue of overbreeding that is plaguing southern Arizona, as well as what her rescue is doing to help the animals in need. Krystal, welcome to the show. If you could, can you just speak a little on the issue of overbreeding tortoises and what role Timmy's Tortoise Rescue plays in helping solve the problem?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, I adopted my first tortoise, Timmy, and I quickly realized the problem with overbreeding with these guys and selling, and that we have nearly zero regulations here in Arizona on the issue. So these guys lay up to anywhere from 30 to 70 in a clutch or eggs twice a year. And in Arizona, we have no problem them hatching out in the wild and naturally here. And each baby is being sold of upwards of $100, which quickly become free pets by the end of the season because they can't get rid of them. There are thousands just at exotic reptile shows, not including what we're finding from backyard breeders. So what I'm finding is a lot of people reaching out with tortoises that have had improper care from being kept in an aquarium or being kept without calcium or proper lighting. And Arizona sunlight's very important. Our guys are the sulcata breed is what we specialize in, but every tortoise breed has their own issues in different areas. And ours just seem to be a big problem here as we are shipping them out of states for a large amount of money. We're seeing people release them into the wild because there's not enough options for rescues or rehabs or anything for tortoises, sick, not sick, or even just people who have gotten them thinking they're going to stay small. Our breeds go from being quarter size to upwards of 150 pounds within 15 to 20 years. So they're very fast growing and they are small bulldozers. And people aren't prepared when they get them for how quick it goes and think they get them as a novelty pet for their children. And unfortunately, 90% of them born and bought into personal housing won't survive their first year of captivity due from inadequate care and just people not doing their own research. So what we do is we're there for people to reach out to. We don't charge an abandoning fee like every other tortoise rescue that I've come across, which I think is actually leading to more of a problem because if people can't afford to house them, they're not going to be able to afford to abandon them. And then they get put into the wrong hands of going to breeders who snatch up these ones when they see them in need. And occasionally then you find people like us who take in anybody who needs a home really, and we try to do the best we can of either rehabilitating them, getting them vet care, getting diet corrections, a big one for us because unfortunately people give these guys fruit, causing lifelong disabilities for them. So we try to work on a lot of different issues there. But the breeding issue has become so out of hand that we're seeing thousands of these guys shipped out of state. They can't survive in cold weather. They are only able to survive in our states outside successfully as of Florida, some places in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Very few other places in the world other than their indigenous areas of sub-Saharan Africa have been able to have them. So we are very fortunate to have these guys here and they have no problem thriving and living. But that becomes a problem when you let breeding pairs go into the wild. They're starting to take over and invade indigenous species of our own small desert tortoises here, the Sonoran tortoises, who are not breeding well in the wild anymore and aren't allowed to be bred in captivity. But they're being taken, so we have problems with those guys as well, and unfortunately I'm not equipped to deal with or take with those guys because of the laws and legality of it with them. So I only deal with sulcatas because there is no laws, and unfortunately that's part of the problem, is there isn't enough laws preventing these guys from being shipped out of the states for very large amounts of money, and anybody listening can look further into that on their own and investigate it if they'd like to, but it's almost gross what happens with a lot of these guys. And the lighter the shell, the more desired they are. So we get people that do kidnap them. There has been cases of that are kidnapped by local breeders. I unfortunately live not too far from a local breeder. His are found constantly, squished in the road, hit by traffic, and he doesn't seem to really bother him much, which bothers me. But those are the people that we're fighting against, is trying to figure out how to get some kind of regulations into the state of preventing some of the overbreeding we're having. And I'm not saying all breeders are bad. I'm not saying they have ill intent. I do understand. It's not that. It's that we have an overbreeding. And when they can't rehome them, they get released or killed or euthanized. And that's also a problem. So, and a lack of education. We try to educate people on what they're getting into and the care they need, because people don't understand and they get them as a novelty and think it's going to be a cute pet. And they're wrong within a few years. So that's kind of where we're at with that in our rescue. And we just try to stay hands-on with our tortoises, try to make them people-friendly, because these are pets. These are not made to live in the wild, especially not here in Arizona, even though they will survive and they will thrive. But that's not what you want to see with any invasive species, as we've all seen in Florida, time and time again, with many invasive species who now live naturally there and are overtaking, including monkeys and iguanas. And that's something that we need to prevent here in Arizona from happening, because too many species are able to survive without human intervention here in our state. So the more we have people releasing things that aren't indigenous, the bigger problems we're going to have with our indigenous species. We have the largest living desert in the world here, and we do need to protect the things that are living there by making sure things that aren't supposed to be there are not there. And it's getting harder and harder to prevent that because of the laws being lenient here in Arizona, unfortunately. And that's not just for this breed, it's for all exotic pets are just very lenient here. So that's why you see a lot of unusual things that most people wouldn't have in other states.
Gotcha, absolutely. One thing I heard that I think some people might be interested in, it was about their diet. So you said something about fruit and them not being allowed to eat fruit. Now, a lot of people would think, well, you know, I can feed a tortoise. They're herbivores essentially. So, you know, whatever, say, a vegetarian might eat, or any other herbivore, they could have at it as well. So why can't they eat fruit? And then what do they eat here?
That is an awesome question. One of the reasons these guys can't eat fruit is they're from sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of fruits don't grow indigenously. For one, we have a lot of cactus, aloe, very native species there, and I don't know all the native species, but very little fruit's going to be found. They eat on a lot of actually dry grass and brush. So hay is their biggest food source that you would like them to have, but unfortunately in captivity, it is becoming harder and harder to get them on that kind of diet that they're supposed to have. So natural grazing is one of the best, with Bermuda grass or just any basic grass with no pesticides. But we do leafy greens, fresh leafy greens. There's also tortoise pellets, which are made from hay, that are popular with some tortoises. I've also not had great success with those myself, because most of mine are larger and have come from years of bad dieting, which is fruit. Even tomatoes and cucumbers could be bad for these guys, potentially in large quantities, and their kidneys cannot process the sugar. So that is why they can't have fruit, and it causes severe metabolic bone disorder, which is what happened with my Tim, and why he looks so funny. As you've met Tim, he has a very funny looking shell, and we get a lot of comments on his shell, and that is from lack of education from his previous owner. I don't want to say lack of love, because I do believe Timmy has always been loved by every owner he's ever had, because he's just that kind of tortoise. But unfortunately, when people aren't educated, they think they're doing the best thing and aren't always by giving large amounts of fruit. And a lot that we've seen have had that issue. Iceberg lettuce is another one you never want to give them. Nothing ever with pea pods or beans. They can't have anything with sprouts because you don't want it getting stuck in there. So it's really just fresh leafy greens. Spinach is good, broccoli once in a blue moon. Cucumbers are okay here and there. Tomatoes are okay here and there, but also they have trouble processing both of those. So it's something that every 6 to 8 weeks we do kind of treats, which is an occasional watermelon. It's one of the few safe fruits that are acceptable every 6 to 8 weeks in small portions. So you do have to monitor how much they're eating. You don't want to give a half a watermelon to even your largest tortoise. While they will be okay, it's not something you want to get anybody in the habit of. So we do try to keep that minimal, but we do give treats, especially in the summer when it's a little hotter and they have a easier process to digest. But we also give a lot of water soaks and baths that help them digesting anything they're not supposed to have.
Gotcha. And so you talk about Tim Shell. Timmy is like the poster child of the rescue. And yeah, he does have an odd looking shell. Now I know that has a name, and it has to do, remind me again, is it the calcium or? So
there's actually, scientists have done a lot of studies on this particular breed because they can't process fruit and most species can, so it's kind of unusual. So it comes from several different factors could come into play. It could be a lack of calcium, which you do have to add powder calcium into their diet 2 to 3 days a week depending on shell and age, and that's how much you add is on shell and size as well. So Timmy could have had probably a few things going on with him, and my guess is lack of calcium and lack of, or probably too much fruit. But I do believe he had proper sunlight. I do believe he was very loved. I do believe he did get outside. I believe he enjoyed his life with his previous family, but I think that they probably gave him a lot of fruit, not knowing better, and unfortunately led to a very old tortoise with a very bad shell. And the way his dimples in and kind of curves in, which is the opposite of pyramiding, which I guess we can talk about in a second, his is a metabolic bone disorder, which is usually due to dieting and lack of calcium. And then you have pyramiding, which I know I was showing you pictures of our Carol we just got in, who's 5 years old and the size of a year-old, and that's strictly due from being in an aquarium and no light. And that's almost pretty much how that goes for them. And it basically raises their shell straight up instead of them growing out and in a nice round shape that you would normally see with a tortoise. So it causes their shell to grow straight up into little spikes.
And now, do you get people that think that's a normal thing? Because, I mean, you know, when you think of a turtle or you think of a tortoise, and especially when you see these tortoises, like, they can look pretty, you know, they look pretty mean, you know, they've got their spikes and all that, and you look at their shell and you see pyramiding, and you're like, oh, okay, this is just like a little Bowser tortoise.
Yeah,
you know?
Ninja Turtle. That's what I joke around like a Ninja Turtle. Yes, absolutely. People aren't aware that that's not how their shell's supposed to look. I don't, maybe there's one species I think that has kind of a rougher looking shell, but shells should be smooth and rounded. You do get curling as they grow with age, which Timmy does have. You can clip those back if it's causing a problem, if they're getting hooked on things as well, but we don't usually have that issue. It's just your personal preference as they get older. But the pyramiding, yeah, we get a lot of people who think they just got the coolest looking tortoise shell on the planet, and that's a problem because the tortoise usually isn't going to survive much longer because they're not aware that we're actually having a health issue, and it's a severe medical issue. And it's like growing, you know, your skin the wrong direction, your bones and everything, because that's, you know, it is a second skin to them, and a lot of people aren't aware of that either, that this is a second skin. They can get internal bruising by getting hit on their shell. You know, your kid throwing basketballs at them, your kid riding them is not cute. It doesn't matter that they're capable. It's not comfortable. They're not horses. They don't make tortoise saddles for a reason, so I will implement that as well, because I see a lot of that where people think it's cute to have kids on tortoises, and I disagree. I don't think that's a good habit for anybody to start, just like your kid shouldn't ride your dog. So, you know, those are some of the things we try to help out with. We also try to give a lot of education. We try to help with rehoming and try to encourage people on how to rehome on their own, because obviously we can't be flooded with thousands of tortoises. We don't have the space for that. As much as we would love to take in every tortoise that does need a home, we do help reach out to people who are looking and try to get them in contact before taking them in ourselves. So we try to give a week waiting period, and at the end of the week, if they still really need us, then we discuss bringing the tortoise into our rescue and what we do, and that their tortoise will go up for rehome 90% of the time, depending on the health need of the tortoise. So some are permanent residents and others will be rehomed.
Awesome, so cool. Good talk with you tonight, Krystal Johnson. I really appreciate you joining me on the Mesa Minute. Krystal Johnson with Timmy's Tortoise Rescue, Rehab, and Rehome. Her page will be linked at the bottom of the article. Please look her up. If you can, donate. She's doing amazing things for these animals out here in Arizona.
You can always reach out for help on your own tortoise and questions as well. On any species of tortoise, we can always help out with anybody, but we do only specialize in sulcatas, but can help with any other questions you have about any breed.
My second guest tonight on the Mesa Minute is JJ Johnson. She's been with Timmy's Tortoise Rescue, Rehab, and Rehome since its inception, and she has a lot to say about how overbreeding has affected her community personally, and also a few things about what she does to help these tortoises in need.
Ashton, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show, JJ. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, this rescue that my daughter started is quite interesting, and it's mostly because of the fact that the state of Arizona has overbreeding and some greed in the business of overbreeding and breeding. And we don't deal in that. We are a strictly rescue. We are there for the tortoise itself. They come to us with all kinds of reasons, all kinds of different disabilities. We help them learn their nutrition value. They get nutrition and physical therapy. And most of all, we give them a loving home, and the ultimate goal is to give them a forever home. And don't forget, these tortoises can live to be 50 to up to 200 years, some of them, and they get quite large. They all have their own personalities. They love baths. They love the hose. They love to have a little scrub down and their neck rubbed, and they do come to their name. They have a memory of 9 years old. They can be taught to love animals. They love our dogs, our cat. They love my 2-year-old grandson who helps us feed them. So after they are corrected in their diet and their physical therapy, we rehome them with the forever home. So help us with this need in this valley. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so working with his tortoises has to be really rewarding. You know, do you feel they reciprocate that love back to you?
I absolutely do. We had one recently lost that we rehomed, and fortunately it didn't work out. We recovered one of them, and she absolutely ran to my feet when we picked her up and rescued her. So she's back with us, but they also form bonds with each other. So don't think you need a lone ranger tortoise. Most of the time they would like to have a friend.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, JJ.
Thank you, Ashton. And let me say I'm one of the biggest fans and proud of your column.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, that wraps up this episode 3 of the Mesa Minute. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Until next time.